If you want to easily stand out in the exam and not just write what everybody does about Mr. Birling, you're going to want to watch this video. So to impress the examiner in the exam, you're going to include the critical idea of Mr. Birling that he explores the fragility of capitalist arrogance. Let's break down what this means. So fragility means something that's like easily broken, a state of vulnerability. So we can actually see that Mr. Birling is constructed to explore the fragility of this capitalist arrogance, and that capitalist arrogance is easily broken because really it stems from insecurity. I know, let's actually explore it a bit deeper. So really, this apparent confidence and this arrogance of capitalism really exposes insecurities about social standing and authority. Mr. Birling is a microcosm. So remember, he is something small represents something larger. He's one small character, but he represents the upper class capitalists. So his capitalist arrogance is actually a symbol of how those in these upper classes feel they have to assert their power, assert their dominance, because they're insecure that their position in society will be threatened and they will lose this power. So really, capitalism stems from insecurity, and Mr. Birling is a symbol of that. So here's how I'd summarize it in a sentence. While Mr. Birling outwardly displays confidence in his speeches and actions, his behavior reflects an acute, so wise, awareness of his precarious, not secure, position as a self-made man in the rigid Edwardian class system. So what's particularly interesting about the character of Mr. Birling is he is self-made. So he wasn't actually born or inherited wealth, unlike his wife. She is her husband's social superior, as suggested by the stage directions, but Mr. Birling hasn't. So his position is more easily threatened because he wasn't born into it. Again, this capitalist arrogance really stemming from this place of insecurity about the position and maintaining that position of social superiority. Socially superior means being above everyone in terms of society. Okay, now let's look at some evidence to show this idea of the fragility of capitalist arrogance. So here is some grade 9 analysis for the key Mr. Birling quote, "I speak as a hard-headed businessman." So remember, we're going to be linking this all back to our critical interpretation of the fragility of capitalist arrogance. So firstly, let's look at the technique of repetition. This repetition actually highlights how this capitalist arrogance needs this reinforcement to maintain credibility. So he must always assert his position, assert his power, because he wants to remain credible. And of course, he's insecure about the fragility, so how easily broken this status is and how it might be removed from him. And also, the repetition could show the fact that he has to repeat this hard-headed and has to reinforce these ideas actually illustrates his insecurity, because he has to reinforce his status and he has to constantly tie it back to his material wealth, because this capitalist arrogance all comes down to the fragility of power and him losing his position in society. So when we're looking at being really critical and giving you analysis that nobody else has, we do this all in the Lightup Hub already for you guys. So if you did want stuff like this and you did like it, go check out the Lightup Hub, because we've got everything on an inspector calls broken down, critical analysis, grade 9 essays, everything you could want already done for you. And now let's look at the second technique of a metaphor. A metaphor is saying something is something else. So him saying he's a hard-headed, he literally isn't hard-headed, but it's a metaphor. So actually, the metaphor of him being hard-headed actually exposes the brittleness of Birling's persona. So if something's brittle, it's hard, but you can easily break it. So we can actually see his arrogance isn't a mark of his true strength as a character, but really it's a fragile facade. A facade is like a mask that crumbles when his authority is questioned. And think about it, when the inspector comes and he starts questioning Mr. Birling, his position is threatened. And we start to see this facade, so this mask, crumble, because of course that exposes the fragility of capitalist arrogance. It's easily broken when questioned, especially when questioned by somebody who's more morally superior. So remember, morals, superior meaning above, and we see, of course, the inspector is morally superior to Birling. To really blow the examiner away in your inspector calls essays, you want to link Priestley's intentions to the idea that Mr. Birling represents the fragility of capitalist arrogance. So the first intention you're going to link it to is Priestley's intentions of him critiquing capitalist insecurity. So of course, by showing Mr. Birling to have this facade, so this mask, that is easily broken and threatened by the inspector, Priestley actually exposes the instability, so it not being stable, of a system that prioritizes profit over people. If we think about Mr. Birling's character being very fragile, so easily broken, and it all being founded and based on capitalist arrogance, to try to like assert his power, it actually illustrates how weak of a system capitalism is opposed to socialism, which is a stronger system because of course that's based on morals, compassion, and social reform. And remember, social reform means changing society in a positive way. And the second Priestley's intentions we can link this to is he is exposing class fragility. So Priestley actually uses Mr. Birling to expose how fragile the social status is of the nouveau rich. Now, nouveau rich just means someone who's recently acquired wealth who wasn't born into it. So Mr. Birling would actually fall into this category of the nouveau rich because he wasn't born into wealth, unlike to his wife. So again, he's reinforcing in this Edwardian era, when the nouveau rich put all of their emphasis on their status and not morals, this is actually going to be challenged in a more of a progressive society and will lead to immoral people being formed. Because if we look at Mr. Birling, he is a nouveau rich, so he got money later on, he wasn't born into it. But of course, because he prioritized that and he focused on wealth and not people, it led to him being immoral. So that is Priestley's critique of the class system as a whole. So if you did like this video, guys, make sure you subscribe. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link to a video here on an in spectacles to help you next with your revision.